Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. We did it. We survived the great Canada-US trade war of 2025, at least for a few weeks. But how did BC Premier David Eevee do? Did his tough stance on American bourbon endear him with British Columbians? Here to discuss is your friend and mine, a political commentator and YouTuber based right here in Vancouver. He is J.J. McCullough, and this is The Crunch. JJ, you never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah, and I think that Premier Eevee has definitely raised his profile amid all of this.
So let's talk about that. And I don't want to talk about the specific policies. I just want to talk about Premier Eevee's popularity. He was on Fox News. He was praised quite well for that interview. He was at the Invictus Games. How do you think he's doing, especially compared to perhaps the other premiers in Canada?
So I think that you're right. I was actually on an American politics podcast the other day, and they actually brought up David Eevee as a sort of like interesting figure in Canadian politics. So clearly his reputation has transcended borders. But I do think that he has done a very good job of sort of in some ways striking a kind of like middle ground between the other sort of high profile premiers who have been sort of weighing in on this.
So give me the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, so like I would say the two ends of the spectrum would be like you have sort of Doug Ford on one end, who's sort of being like trying to very much be the Captain Canada in this kind of like trans ideological kind of just puff your chest very proud sort of way. Like,
with a hat.
Yeah, with the hat. And like, we're really going to go, tough against Trump and, all that. And then on the other hand, you have sort of Premier Smith in Alberta, who is much more sort of ideologically, I think, inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt and to cast sort of aspersions on Trudeau and sort of say that this is ultimately like a political problem that's being caused by sort of like the wrong sort of political mindset. Whereas in Premier Eevee, who is kind of in the middle, who I think has done a pretty good job at representing what I imagine to be kind of like the median Canadian sort of disposition, which is sort of like kind of rueful, but sort of principled and sort of like willing to go to toe with the Americans, but then also willing to sort of like say that this is something that's happening in sadness, not kind of like gunning for a fight the way that Premier Ford seems to be.
Yeah, so you think he's been quite successful at that? Because certainly at the Invictus Games, he was telling people like, hey, Americans, we're with you. And they were giving him the heart symbol as well. Yeah. So it seemed to be quite effective, not just for obviously British Columbians and other Canadians, but perhaps some American viewers.
Well, I think he sort of embodies this certain kind of sort of left of center, middle class kind of moderate disposition, right? Where it's just kind of like you don't like Trump. And I think that his disdain for Trump seems kind of obvious. But then at the same time, kind of paying sort of lip service to the idea like, well, I don't dislike Americans. I just have a problem with their crazy government right now. And we'll never stop fighting for what makes this country good, which is this kind of like hazy sort of progressive kind of ethos and all that. And I do think that just like his manner, just his kind of like awkward middle class kind of dad energy, the fact that he's kind of thin, a little sort of dorky in kind of his mannerisms. Like, I think that resonates. He reminds you, I think, of the typical Canadian in a way that, frankly, I think somewhat weirder politicians like Smith and Ford just don't.
Right. Now, we just came out of a BC provincial election, so he doesn't have that to look forward to or use to his advantage. Is this something that might help him in 3 or 4 years?
I think you would have to think that it does. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to be sort of seeing yet.
He can screw it up. He has a lot of time to screw it up.
Well, and just to sort of say that, like, we don't know exactly how mercurial Trump is going to be. Yeah. Like, is this going to be like a reoccurring theme of the next 4 years? Or is this going to be something that Trump loses interest in, like building the wall on the Mexico border? And then, a couple of years from now, we're going to be like, oh, remember when we were on the brink of a tariff war? Whatever came of that? So I do think a lot of Canadian politicians, in a weird sort of twisted way, have a kind of interest in sort of seeing this narrative continuing. Because as we all know, there's nothing a politician loves more than being able to sort of rally the voters around the flag with themselves waving it.
So in conclusion, what I'm hearing is J.J. McCullough says David Eevee forever BC Premier.
No, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I'm not saying anything as far as that goes, but no, I mean, I think in some way you have to give him credit. He has risen to the occasion which you expect a head of government to do.
JJ, I appreciate your insights as always. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Dr. Robert Carruthers, Catherine Pope, and J.J. McCullough for tonight's show. Please send me your thoughts on who you think is our Captain Canada. Mo at thisisvancolour.com. Also, social media is poison, so please don't follow me on any of these platforms at VANCOLOUR. We're back next week to criticize the government some more, so in the meantime, be colorful. Peace.